Okay, welcome everybody to another special edition of Third Degree, the podcast. I'm Buzz Carrick. With me today is Andy Swift, Executive Director of the Dallas Cup. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you took over as Director of the Dallas Cup in 2012 from Dallas soccer legend Gordon Jago. Before that, you were, at one point anyway, the GM of the Dallas Burn from 2000 to 2003. And you oversaw the transition to the ownership by the Hunts. You also have been Senior VP of Marketing and Communications for Major League Soccer. So you are a man in the soccer business in Dallas, and now you will run the Dallas Cup. So for those of you who are new to the soccer world, new soccer fans, there are some of us, Andy, why don't you sum up what the Dallas Cup is and where it is in the landscape of soccer in the United States and the world?
Yeah, all right. So this is our 40th year. The Dallas Cup, Dr. Pepper Dallas Cup, will be celebrating 40 years this year. Started in 1980 as a 24-team tournament. I think 3 or 4 countries participated in that one in 1980. And today we're at 248 teams in this one. More than 100 countries have been represented at Dallas Cup through the years, 48 states. The top referees in the world at one time or another have come through Dallas Cup. We've had over, I would say 20 or 30 over the course of the 40 years, FIFA referees that have actually refereed in FIFA World Cup finals. And then every year we get about 25 to 30 FIFAs officiating that one particular tournament. And the Dallas Cup has kind of been a Dallas institution, a North Texas institution over the last 4 years, right? I mean, it started in 1980 while the precursor to MLS was the professional league in the U.S. It was the NASL. And the Dallas Cup has survived the folding of the NASL, then the heyday of indoor soccer, and remember the sidekicks. Sidekick soccer was kind of the soccer scene in Dallas through the 80s. Gordon Jago, he was the coach, legendary coach of the Sidekicks. Dallas Cup, again, was part of all those years of indoor soccer. And then the World Cup came to the U.S. in '94. The Dallas Cup was involved with that as well in terms of hosting FIFA officials that came to Dallas leading up to that World Cup and the years leading up to it, and then obviously helping the venue here in Dallas with volunteers and with staffing. Then the Dallas Cup continued on as MLS started. Major League Soccer started up in '96. Dallas Cup was part of that. And today, the very vibrant youth soccer scene here in Dallas, youth development scene here in Dallas with not only FC Dallas and their very strong academy, but the Texans and Solar. And as you know, we're one of the top regions for soccer development in the U.S., and Dallas Cup has been a part of that as well. So for 40 years, we've kind of been the thread through all these soccer events, and it's a Dallas, North Texas institution. And we like to say we're a gem, of the soccer here in this area.
Not that the Dallas Cup wasn't big before, but I think that you've taken this tournament to a higher level. What did you feel that your sort of goal or mandate was when you came in and took over this tournament to get it where it is now? Well,
and my history with Dallas Cup goes back, thank you for saying that, but let me set the record straight. I mean, many people have been involved with Dallas Cup through the years and been instrumental in getting it to where it is today. And the tournament has been what it is for a long time. I was lucky enough to play in tournaments 2 and 4. I volunteered for 12 years as well, through my college years and into my professional career, both in television and then in soccer. Dallas Cup helped open up doors for me. So I've been able to live Dallas Cup through all its stages, either as a player, as a volunteer, as a journalist covering the Dallas Cup, then later as an administrator in the professional league that had ties to the tournament, and now running it from the inside. And I can tell you, Dallas Cup has always been a prominent tournament and one with a lot of prestige, and it was able to capture lightning in a bottle a little bit in the early 80s, in that there really wasn't a tournament like it anywhere in the world. And so it came at the right time. the U.S. didn't have a pro league shortly after Dallas Cup started, so for people particularly in this area, it was the only way to go see high-level outdoor soccer. You know, the Sidekicks then started in the mid-'80s. They became very successful. Gordon Jago, who was with the Sidekicks, then came on board with the Dallas Cup and ran it for 10 years. But if you go back to the 90s, I mean, teams like Real Madrid and AC Milan and Sao Paulo and Boca Juniors, they started to come to Dallas Cup in the late 80s, early 90s. ESPN International carried some finals in the mid-90s because the World Cup was in the U.S., so the U.S. was really on the forefront of people's attention in soccer worldwide, and that helped Dallas Cup. It elevated the awareness of Dallas Cup. And then when Gordon took over again, you know, he brought other relationships and other influences that helped elevate it yet again. And then now, when I took over, and getting back to your question, sorry to be long-winded, but I just wanted to show that really it hasn't just been recently. Dallas Cup has been what it is for a long, long time. And so when I took over, you know, for me it was like, you know, don't fix if it ain't broke, right? I mean, it's like polish it. But just steer the bus in the right direction, because this thing is such a unique and in terms of an event, such a wonderful event that goes far beyond what happens on the soccer fields, and we can get to that in a little bit. So for me, my personal goal at least was like, don't screw it up, and then do whatever you can, bring areas of expertise to it that perhaps the tournament wasn't as strong in prior, and then help in that, and then elevate it in those areas while still maintaining the high level of areas it had in other ways, if that makes any sense. So
yeah, well, any tournament that lasts 40 years, a lot of people have to have contributed and done a lot of great things along the way. Yeah,
and every year we have over 1,000 volunteers that help, close to 1,300 volunteers that help. Now, out of those volunteers, there are about 30 or 40, they're called committee chairs, that they oversee certain areas of the tournament. They're all experts in that one area, whether it's registration or managing a venue or PR or hospitality, whatever it is. We have like 30 or 40 different areas. Some of these volunteers that are committee chairs have been involved with the tournament over 3 decades, and they all take vacation time during the tournament. You help us, you know, your family, your wife helps us. And I mean, my parents were volunteers. I was a volunteer, and everybody that works in our office, well, we have 4 full-time, but, you know, so many of these volunteers have been doing it for so long. They're really the ones that make this thing click. I mean, they're the ones that are key, because they are experts in their area, and they're very passionate about what they do. And without that, there's no way this tournament would be what it is. Seriously.
I'm asking this question without knowing the answer, which is you're never supposed to do. But is there anything special for the 40th anniversary? Anything y'all are doing to commemorate this big
Yeah, so sure. So one thing that we started to do a little bit earlier this year, we have a 40 for 40 social media campaign through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, where we're highlighting all our important moments, events, players, teams that have come through. A lot of really interesting things that have happened at Dallas Cup, players that have played in the tournament, teams that have participated in, teams that have brought special players, special teams that not necessarily drew the attention from a competitive point of view, but from a cultural point of view or a society point of view. For example, once we had a team made up of half Israeli, half Palestine kids playing on the same team, the peace team. So it's a social media campaign highlighting those events. We ran a special Dallas Cup Minute campaign on the ticket, which Bob Sturm was able to voice for us, and that was kind of cool. And then, you know, opening day will be special as well. We have a special VIP guest this year, one of the iconic players in Mexican national team history, El Matador, Luis Hernandez, will be our guest of honor. He played in the Cotton Bowl, played in MLS. Obviously, he played with the Mexican national team, top 10 player from Mexico, and it was important to bring somebody like that too, as our Mexican partners and Mexican teams from Liga MX have been a big part and a big reason why this tournament was able to develop over the years, because they established our ability to get international teams, and then clearly from there then we went on and got more marquee teams from around the world. But they've been a key part of this. And then we'll have special commemorative iconic marks throughout our hotels, and different touch points with the players and the managers and coaches of the teams to remind them that it's the 40th anniversary. So, and then most importantly, the supergroup product this year, the talent level playing in the supergroup this year. I mean, we've talked about it.
Yeah.
9 of the 12 teams are in first or second place in their respective academy divisions. It's going to be a very strong supergroup. So that'll be perfect for our 40th.
If I understand my history correctly, I believe that the Dallas Cup was first put together by the Longhorns Soccer
Correct,
Club.
yeah.
Do you know enough about the history? I'm assuming you know a lot that you can tell us. What was the general idea when they created the tournament in the first place back then?
So the Dallas Longhorns were one of the Classic League teams, one of the elite clubs in Dallas back in the day. Buzz, you played in the area, but teams like Titans and Comets and Longhorns were one of those clubs, and they would often, or not often, every summer they would travel to Europe and play tournaments in Europe. Ron Griffith was the director of that club, and he wanted to start a tournament here. He's an English fellow. He wanted to start a tournament here to thank the clubs overseas that hosted the Longhorns when they traveled abroad. So he started a tournament where he invited a few teams from Europe, particularly England, and started a tournament where those teams could also, if they wanted, could stay with local families, some of the teams that played here. And that's how that tradition started. We're very unique in that way, in that about 30 to 40 teams that come from abroad stay with local teams, local families, which just further enhances the experience of the players when they play here. But that tradition started with that very first.
Do I remember correctly that was it Beckham that stayed in touch with his family and came back and visited them?
Yeah, many do, but Beckham is one of the more famous cases because he wrote about it in his book, in his autobiography, that he stayed with a Mexican-American family and wrote about the day-to-day events that took place while he played here. Yeah.
Speaking of playing in this tournament, you already mentioned it. You played in this tournament twice.
Yeah.
Any fun? Who were you playing for, and any fond memories of playing in the tournament?
Yeah, sure. Lone Star Knights was the team. There's a picture there. We're in a conference room right now for those listening. It's not a visual here, but see a picture there. In fact, you can walk up while I talk into the mic. You can walk up and get it. See that one down there?
Yeah.
With opening ceremonies from 81 or 82. Yeah. So I played for Lone Star Arlington 2 years. It was a one-off club. We had like 2 age categories, and it's no longer there.
Oh, you're in this picture.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a picture that I got from my parents.
Yeah.
So I wore this hat, but there's 2 guys wearing that same hat, so I'm either that or that. But you can tell by that. I think that's me.
Well, I'll tweet this out later so everybody can see it.
Well, it's blurry, but fond memories of playing. Yeah, I remember actually playing in Dallas Cup. I remember more vividly the hosting of a player from abroad more than what happened on the field. And so many other people that played in Dallas Cup also have more vivid memories of that, being able to host a foreign player than what happened on the field. But we had we hosted a team from Guatemala the first year, and then a team from Canada the second year I played. I remember games. The first year we got spanked pretty good from a team from Mexico. I think beat us 6-0. And I remember looking at those guys and like, man, those guys are so good. This is like 1981, so a different world back then. And then the second year we got to the quarters, but bowed out. So, but it was fun.
Well, you mentioned that you did some PR and some media work for the Dallas Cup in the late 80s and early 90s. That was a little bit after that, sort of the mid 90s is when I started covering the tournament and going. I remember distinctly going to Lake Highlands and sitting in the press box for like a week with Paul Gardner telling me stories about
Soccer America,
holding court and just telling story after story.
Yep.
But Those were some.
So you got to meet Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. Year after year, I sat with him. He used to have the best stories in the press
Yeah,
box.
Paul Gardner was instrumental too in getting the word out in Dallas Cup, getting the word out about itself, I guess. He was Soccer America back then was the industry, the soccer publication. He came every year, wrote extensively about Dallas Cup, and from Soccer America's writings in the mid '80s to the late '80s, then it started to spread. World Soccer then started to send journalists. Placar of Brazil started, and once those start to send writers, then it just snowballs from there, and it just becomes this thing. It's amazing what this became in the mid-'90s. I mean, it was incredible what was happening here in Dallas in terms of hosting an international tournament of its kind. And this is before MLS started, so there was really no high-level international soccer being played here on an annual basis anyway. So.
To my memory, that's about when I remember started broadcasts of the tournament happening. Were you involved in the genesis of that at all?
Well, no, I was involved in helping the producers and the talent. I was as the volunteer that covered media, I was basically their researcher and prepared game notes for them, kind of like what Evan does now. Now it's a full-time position, but back then it was all volunteer. But no, it's great that we've evolved like that. But and I remember Ty Keogh was one of the announcers one year, and going to dinner with him after games with the crew. And for a guy in college or right out of college, those were kind of like pretty cool things. And for me, Dallas Cup really opened the doors into broadcasting, which then led to soccer.
Yeah.
Tell
us about your TV for this year's 40th anniversary of Dallas Cup.
So this will be our second year of a 5-year deal with Univision Deportes. This is actually the third year that they've been broadcasting, but this is the second in the 5-year agreement that we reached last year. They will be broadcasting Supergroup games and also the Under 14 Supergroup, which we created in conjunction with Univision. We created the Under 14 Supergroup. So they'll be broadcasting some preliminary games and then the semis of both Supergroups and then their finals. And then for the first time this year, we've partnered with Flow Sports, the streaming company. They're not new in terms of streaming. They've been streaming for a while, other content, but they're fairly new to soccer. I think they're DC United's partner and Cincinnati's partner. And this is a pretty extensive streaming agreement we have with them. They'll be broadcasting all our quarterfinal games for all age groups, semifinals, and then the finals for all those games not involving the two super groups, which is obviously a Univision property. So we're excited. That's a ton of games. That's like 35 games that will be broadcast nationally, either over the air or, not over the air, because Univision Deportes is what's that considered? Cable? Not cable.
Cable or broadcast or
it's nowadays it's all blurry, right?
It's not really not streaming.
Over the air. Right, exactly.
Well, the Supergroup was created in 1990. Do you know anything about the creation of the Supergroup? Why did they deem that they needed a separate higher level group?
So there was the under 19, a regular under 19 bracket through the 80s, but towards the late 80s, and particularly after the U.S. was announced as the World Cup venue for 1994, interest in coming to the U.S. really started to peak, and the Dallas Cup was a tournament that many teams from abroad looked at as an opportunity to go to the U.S. and check out this country that is going to suddenly host the World Cup in a few years. So as the Supergroup got stronger and stronger, and Dallas Cup is invitation only, it always was, but more and more applicants wanted to play in that under 19 age bracket. There was enough the standard was high enough from all the applicants that they could carve out a super group, and which also makes for a great television property as well. And that all came hand in hand, and ESPN got involved shortly after that. And I think that it was smart and genius, and there was nothing like that. There was no tournament in the world that had an under 19 elite bracket like that. And so it definitely piqued interest, not only with the broadcaster, but then it kind of snowballs. Other elite teams see it, and before you know it, you have all these elite academies from around the world wanting to play in Dallas Cup, and today most elite academies or most pro teams, the top pro teams from around the world have competed in Dallas Cup. There's one exception. And we're working hard every day to one day bring them, and that's Bayern, ironically, because
that is ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so FC Dallas is helping us with that, and they lent us a hand. And the approach this year, we came very close with Bayern. But there was a conflict in scheduling because they're also participating in the UEFA Youth League.
Right.
And so there was a conflict of schedules. So we will keep trying with Bayern, but any other major club in Europe, any other major club in South America, and obviously in North America has played in Dallas Cup.
Now that you did mention the Super 14s were new last year,
Yeah.
what was the thinking with that new group? And I assume since it's back, it must have been a success.
Yeah, so that was Univision when they approached us about wanting to broadcast Dallas Cup games. Obviously, the super group, the traditional super group, the under-19 super group, is of interest, and because it's our famous and our marquee bracket. But in those conversations, they also expressed interest in doing something with a younger age bracket, with perhaps the goal of one day getting to have something like the Little League World Series. Now, the Little League World Series, it took 50 years for it to get to the point where it is today, and those are a little bit younger kids. I think those are 12-year-olds, but it's kids from all over the world competing, kids from all over the U.S. competing to come here and stage the finals in the U.S. So maybe the goal is to get to that point one day, but they wanted to start focusing on that younger age group. We chose the under 14 as kind of an ideal age group. There's not another one like it around the world right now in that particular age bracket. And that's, we're starting small and growing it from there. And this year we already have 5 professional academy clubs with a team in the Univision under 14s super group.
Both the 14s and the 19s, how do you go about creating a super group for any given year? What kind of teams do you look at?
Sure.
How does that process happen?
Yeah. So we there's several goals in mind, and we'll just talk about the under 19 super group, and we've been doing that
Sure.
one for a while. So it's 12 teams. And the reason we do 12 instead of 16 is because we want to give the opportunity for teams to also advance as a wild card. We don't want a team from, for example, if you lose your first game, let's say Manchester United or Real Madrid comes, they lose their first game, and then not have the ability to then advance out of their group. If we have 16, each group would only advance one out. But if we have 12, each group of 4 advances one out, and then you get a wild card. So that's how we get to 12. And then we try to be geographically diverse. We want teams from North America, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. And then we want teams from Latin America, and then we want teams from Europe, and then, when possible, Asia and Africa. And so there's certain countries that we already get an automatic slot in there. For example, we have a relationship with the EPL. So they're under 18 champion every year. They, in the subsequent tournament, in the subsequent spring, after they get crowned, they're invited to compete in the super group of the Dallas Cup. If they can't because of a scheduling issue, then we'll go to the second place team and so on. So that's, for example, this year how Arsenal is in the tournament. And we're working on perhaps doing something with La Liga, perhaps. We've had Villarreal, they're coming this year. We had Valencia come a couple years ago. So it takes a while to form a relationship where it's official and it's automatic, but the discussions are there, and we hope to one day down the line, one year, be able to do that with La Liga as well. Then our apparel partner, whether, like, we've had Adidas now this is our 6th year with Adidas. Before that it was Nike, before that Diadora, and Adidas was our partner in years past as well. They've been great partners, and they help us identify a team that they can also help bring us every year. And sometimes that's how we get, like, the Man Uniteds and the River Plates, is through our partnership with Adidas. We try to include one local team, and we look at the standings of the Development Academy League every December. We have a cutoff date and that's, FC Dallas is our host club. That's they're the local team. We also try to include MLS teams because this obviously is also to help the growth of U.S. soccer. This year we have the defending champions NYCFC. Last year we did as well, Atlanta, the year before Dallas. So we always try to have the defending champion participate if they can, and then another strong club from MLS. This year we have Salt Lake, they're in first place. We have Toronto, very strong team, NYCFC first place, Dallas first place. So all the MLS teams are at the top of their game, and then the top teams in Mexico as well.
So outside of the Supergroup, in the broader scope of the tournament, you've mentioned that it's invitation only.
Yeah, right.
Is that the same sort of deal where sometimes you have relationships, or are you still trying to go broad and get...
So by invitation only, it means teams apply, and then we select. We invite teams from those applications. We typically get about 400 applications, and we're selecting about half of the teams. International teams, we also go out and reach out and invite, but we also take in applications and we go through those. We have a vetting process, same with teams from the U.S. Local teams have to go through qualifiers. We have 3 separate qualifiers that we have in place to qualify teams into the tournament.
They're like small mini tournaments?
But they're existing tournaments. It's the Ken Smith tournament that is run by Classic League, the Bobby Ryan, and the Fall Classic run by the Texans.
Okay. Your opening day at the Cotton Bowl has become a pretty marquee event.
Yeah.
Some good names in that tournament this year. Can you tell us both about this year's event and sort of what the idea is with that whole event in general?
Sure, yeah. So last year we set a record. I think we had 20,000 and change
that sounds right.
in attendance. Yeah. So we've been able to grow that event. We work with the city as well, the city of Dallas, to get DISD students there. We have all our participating teams there for the parade. It's a very international event as well. All the referees are there. I think like last year we had 40 countries represented on the field. Really, Dallas Cup, when you think about it, it's like the most international event that takes place every year in Dallas. And this is just a time for, and it's kind of tradition now for the Dallas soccer community, the North Texas soccer community, to go out and catch Dallas Cup games. Many opt to go to opening day because we have some really good games every year opening day. And we've kind of like made a tradition now to have FC Dallas as the host club open it up against one of the marquee teams in their group. This year they open up against Villarreal of La Liga. I think they played Arsenal in the past and teams
last year's Arsenal,
right. And then Arsenal came back this year representing EPL. They were very keen to do it. They got to the final last year, and I think right away, within minutes after that final whistle blew, they were already
against Tigres, right?
Yeah, they were wanting to come back, and it worked out great because they were next in line when Chelsea couldn't make it because of scheduling conflicts. Liverpool came as our invite, and they'll have the marquee game, which is always what we do after the parade. At 6:30, we have that marquee game, and so now we'll put the defending champs Tigres against Liverpool, who is in first place in EPL, right? Yes, they are.
That'll be pretty good.
And
Liverpool, why would you pick Liverpool, Andy Swift?
Right, no, it's the first time they're in the tournament since I've started, so that's good.
So other than the Cotton Bowl, and obviously we know that the Toyota Stadium at the end is involved. So what other places are you playing this year?
Yeah, so we play in 2 stadiums, those 2 that you mentioned, and then we also play in 2 complexes, MoneyGram Park and MoneyGram Soccer Park, I think is the official name, and then the Classic League fields at Richland College, where we've been playing a long, long time. So in total this year we have 26 fields plus 2 stadiums that we use up. So a very large footprint, 14 hotels. So it really is a busy 10 days, but most importantly, that's a lot of soccer being played. But it's kind of cool that we open up at the Cotton Bowl for that big crowd there, and then through the week, all kinds of games are going on at Richland and at MoneyGram, and then we end up in Frisco at Toyota Stadium. So we kind of like catch a little bit of a bunch of locations and spread our footprint a little bit to give people around the Metroplex a chance to go see some games.
Now, I know that there's at least some sort of informal, or maybe it's more than that, relationship between you and the Generation Adidas Cup, which takes
yeah.
place. MLS runs at the same time in the
Yeah,
same place.
right.
So this podcast is not about the Generation Adidas Cup, but could you tell us a little
Sure.
bit about that relationship and where you guys fit in with them?
Yeah, so the relationship came about because we have a common partner in Adidas, and also we have a relationship with MLS in that their teams play in the Super Group. Well, they play in all age brackets, but it's those Super Group MLS teams that we would often refer to MLS for guidance, say, hey, which teams are you recommending? And so the relationship was there, and they were seeking to expand their GA Cup from what they were doing with it, which I believe was being played in the summer, and it wasn't as extensive as it is now. Now they have regional qualifiers where the MLS teams play to decide who goes into which. There's an elite bracket, and So, but then they have to have the finals in a location, and the conversation started. Basically, we approached through Adidas, MLS, and said, look. As you start this, we have infrastructure here. We can help you get this tournament growing, and we have relationships with teams. Obviously, clearly they do as well, but we have relationships with academies, and so we can help you with that, with refereeing, with travel, with infrastructure, while you develop your own infrastructure to put on that tournament, and that's what's been happening. So every year, they are more and more and more involved in what they do with GA Cup, to where now, compared to how it was 5 years ago, we do far less than we used to. But it's good to see now it's kind of a self-contained operation that they have, and we help as we can here and there. But they're well on their way to producing that on their own now.
Yeah, and it makes this whole week even more of a bigger giant soccer event in Dallas.
Absolutely. We could call it Soccer Week in North Texas. FC Dallas plays a home game before it all gets started that Saturday night. And now the Sidekicks are also playing and active again. We have Dallas Cup. We have Generation Adidas Cup. And then the International Girls Cup takes place that week as well. So between the Dr. Pepper Dallas Cup and GA Cup and the Girls Cup, it really is all eyes of youth soccer kind of focused on Dallas for at least a week, and it's kind of cool.
Is there any relationship with the Girls Cup, or is that an independent?
No, they're independent, but we have a relationship in that we help each other out, tickets, and we invite. We send them a block of tickets. They can come to our games if we want, and sometimes teams inquire about sending a girls team to Dallas Cup. We explain no, we're not, but then we refer them to a tournament. Yeah, so we run concurrently.
Two American teams have won the Super Group.
Yeah.
The first one was the Dallas Texans Red back in 2005. They actually were two-time national champs coming into that tournament. That team had Omar Gonzalez, Andre Akman, Dane Santos, Bill Dorsey, Stephen McCarthy. They ended up knocking off Santos Laguna 4-2 in the championship.
Yeah. Was it 06?
05 was what the notes I read this morning, but it may have been 06. I could be wrong. The article I read could have been outdated.
Yeah, well, 05 is probably when they won the national championship, and then they won the 06 Dallas Cup.
Yeah, that's more than likely my bad notes more than it is the truth. Okay, so we'll call that 06. And then they knocked off Santos Laguna in the final. Do you remember? I remember watching that run as it happened. That team was spectacular. There were quite a few guys that ended up with successful pro careers. That was one of the best American teams we've ever seen.
Absolutely. That was a very, very strong Texans team. That was when Texans was not only the top youth club here in Dallas, they were among the top clubs, if not the top club in the U.S. at the time. And they've had several alums come out of their club, not just Omar Gonzalez, who was on that team, but other prominent players, including Clint Dempsey, who played in Dallas Cup as well. Yeah. And so, it was a really strong team. And I remember, I wasn't at the final. I don't know if you were or not, but I remember somebody telling me, hey, the Texans won the final. It's like, wow. That was a big moment for U.S. soccer, or at least U.S. youth soccer, in that a U.S. team was able to win the Super Group. Yeah. It was a legit team for sure.
I was not at the final, but I think I saw two games in their run that year. They were a joy to watch as an American team.
Yeah.
Jonathan Villanueva, who went to
yeah.
Virginia, was their number 10 playmaker,
Huh.
and never quite panned out as a pro, but
yeah.
he was a spectacular playmaker at the time. And then 2017,
Yeah.
of course, the
Yeah.
FC Dallas won the Supergroup with notably with Jesus Ferreira, Paxton Pomykal, and Reggie Cannon, who were
Yeah.
all already pros, but came back
Yeah.
as everybody does. That you
Right.
bring your pros and play them in
Sure.
your 19 team.
Yeah.
To win that group. And a current North Texas signing, Arturo Rodriguez,
Yeah.
scored the game-winning goal
Yeah.
against Monterrey, which is a good team, and it's in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, that's an academy rival for FC Dallas.
Well, that Monterey team had Jonathan Gonzalez playing holding
right.
mid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a very good Monterey team. That was a nationally televised game on Univision. It was fantastic because it was nice to see FC Dallas win and on their home grounds. A big crowd was there that day. And they became the first MLS team to win the Supergroup. And, it's these MLS teams that compete now in Supergroup, just like Texans back in '06. It was a big deal to win Dallas Cup. And that's just, we at Dallas Cup are proud that teams look at it like that. And not just the U.S. teams, but all teams that raise that trophy, the Boot and Ball Trophy. They're so proud to have won that. And man, that FC Dallas team was pretty good. And
Yeah.
Paxton, that tournament was insane. Paxton won. He was on an all-star team,
Right.
an all-star Dallas Cup team that went to Europe every few years, like not every other year, but maybe 4 of the last 6 years we've formed an all-star team and taken them to Europe to play in tournaments and train at high-level academies there. And Paxton, the year he won his spot on the all-star team, then went on to much bigger things in Europe that year. He was tournament MVP and played with the Legends, but then he came back to play in Dallas Cup as in the under 19
Last year.
super group. Yeah, well, yeah, and then last year, but
He got hurt last year.
that 2017 team was pretty amazing.
I was going to ask you about the All-Star teams if you were still doing that. If you
Yeah,
plan to.
we do it. Yeah, it's always a budget issue and a budget consideration, but we've been able to do it 4 or 5 out of the last 6 or 7 years. So it's not happening this year. That we're focusing on our 40th and resources for our 40th, but hopefully it's something that we can keep going in the future.
I just talked to Luchi Gonzalez, 2 hours ago about the Dallas Cup, and he talked about how invaluable it is
Yeah.
to their academy as a whole,
Sure.
both academy players and MLS players that they send down, because they actually have a goal of, by the time a kid leaves the academy, they want them to
Yeah.
play 50 high-level international games,
wow.
international opponents.
Yeah.
And the Dallas Cup is a huge part of that process
Yeah.
because the level of competition is so incredibly high.
Yeah, that's great that he says that. I mean, for us, it's important. Part of our mission is to help develop U.S. soccer, obviously, but for us, it's nice that these MLS academies and U.S.-based academies look at Dallas Cup as an important part of their development. Real Salt Lake, for example, who just recently set a record for homegrowns, has publicly stated that Dallas Cup is an important part of their youth academy and
Yeah.
development program as well. So yeah, we're proud of that. And you know what? I should say, it's not just we're not just helping develop players. We're helping develop referees too. The EPL, we have a program with them where this is kind of one of the final exams before referees get promoted into championship in the EPL. CONCACAF sends their newly appointed FIFAs because if you think about it, these referees gain experience by refereeing within the CONCACAF region. So they're limited in culture versus culture. Like they'll have teams from Canada and the US, the Latin American countries, Mexico and Central America and the Caribbean, and that's kind of the dynamic and the only dynamic they see. But once they're appointed to be a FIFA, they're going to have to officiate in tournaments involving many cultures. So at Dallas Cup, they can come and get that first experience, a team from Asia against a team from Europe. That's something they don't get to see within CONCACAF, and that's how Dallas Cup helps develop them.
Yeah.
And, so we have U.S. academies, Canadian academies, Japanese, Australia, New Zealand. It's incredible.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, because I remember at many Dallas Cup games there being like a referee evaluator in almost every game, either
Yep.
in the press box or on the sideline,
Sure.
and grading those guys,
Yep.
because it is such a
They are
different
getting assessed.
competition.
Absolutely. All those referee groups that come are assessing the referees.
Well, you know as well as anybody, the reason we have cards in soccer is because of the language barrier
Yeah,
in
right,
international competition.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you just pointed,
Right,
nobody
yeah,
knew what
nobody
you
would
that
know,
meant.
yeah.
You got to have a card.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But, like if you think about it, remember Howard Webb officiated a couple years ago, and we didn't publicly say anything about him that he was going to referee some games. And that game, he walked out with every game we play, even if they're not at the stadium, even if they're on the field, we do the processional. They walk out with the referee to the midfield line. And so when the players realized that it was Howard Webb there in the middle, they're like jaws dropped. They're like, "Are you kidding me?" It's funny, but it's pretty cool if you're 14 and you're playing in a game and you're playing against a team from another continent, and the referee in the middle is wearing a FIFA badge. I mean,
and maybe a team you've heard of or watched on TV.
Exactly.
You mentioned teams like the Peace Cup and some teams from Africa that you brought before. Is there anybody that's sort of a special team in this year's field that we should know about?
No. So every year we do try we're always trying to bring teams like that to Dallas Cup, and it happens every 4 or 5 years. I mean, everything has to fall just right, and the funding has to be in place. But there are several that are in the works, and Gordon, who retired as the executive director but now is our ambassador, is really primarily the one involved in spearheading those efforts. And every once in a while we'll succeed. But the Thai boys that were saved from the cave. So there were efforts to bring them. It wasn't able to work out. A women's team from Tibet, we made some inroads in trying to bring them as special guests. A women's team from Tibet that are refugees in India. It's kind of a long story, but there's a nice story there, and we were trying to fund something so they could go. They eventually ended up going to a tournament in Vancouver, which was nice, so they at least got to travel to North America. And then Doc Lawson, I don't know if you know.
Of course, Psychic's great,
So he is very involved in Liberian soccer, and we've been now for several years working towards bringing a team from Liberia. It would be the first youth soccer team from Liberia to come play in a tournament in the U.S. So those are all things that we're always working on those things, and sometimes they hit, and when they don't for that particular tournament, we roll it over and keep trying for the next one.
I believe Chris Bondi was of Liberian.
He was,
descent.
exactly.
He's now a college coach.
He is, yes. Yeah. Up in the Northeast.
I don't know if he has any connections to Liberia or not, but he's got a Dallas connection. Yeah. There's been a long history of famous players that have come through the Dallas Cup. Even like the Arsenal kid last year that now is a big player for them.
Right, the winger.
The winger. All the way back to Beckham to Raul. I mean, the list is Rafael Marquez, right? The Emperor, right?
Yeah, no, the list is, it's just, and every year it just gets longer. I'll just throw out a few things. For example, when Man United recently beat PSG in France, 2 players came off the bench. Both of those players that came off the bench from their academy or recently promoted from their academy played a Dallas Cup the year prior. And sometimes players play that tournament, and then within months, they're playing in the first team. And going back to like when Raul played here with Real Madrid, won the championship, won the Dallas Cup in '93, got to Madrid, promoted to the first team immediately, and then the rest is history. Jonathan Gonzalez, this is a great note here. 2017 got to the final, played against FC Dallas, lost in the final, was immediately promoted to the first team, won MVP of Liga MX, and now plays with the national team 2 years later. There's stories like that all over the place with Dallas Cup. 1 out of every 11 goal scorers from the last 2 World Cups. So 1 out of every 11 guys that have scored a goal over the last 2 World Cups has played in Dallas Cup.
That's remarkable.
That's incredible. Ivan Perisic of Croatia, who scored in the World Cup final, Dallas Cup. So there's so many of those. At any given time, half the Mexican national team has played Dallas Cup. Has played Dallas Cup. And the U.S. is getting to the point where the U.S. now too as well.
Between the number of Mexican teams that come here and bring legit top line teams too, it's
how's this? The top 4 goal scorers right now in MLS like today, all played in Dallas Cup, and only 2 are from the U.S. Which is remarkable, right? Only 2 are from the U.S. It's not like because it's MLS. So pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy. Well, your whole tournament wraps up with the championship. 2-day, I believe it's 2-day championship. Would we call that a weekend at the stadium?
Championship weekend is what we call it because the Friday night is the semifinals of the Super Group, and then the 2 days, younger age groups on Saturday, older age groups on Sunday.
So that's the closing of your tournament. It's the big ball and boot
trophy presentations, yeah.
and
Yeah.
the teams up there at
Yeah.
Toyota Stadium, and that ends off your tournament on a big note. The teams that win those tournaments, I think, pick up a humongous bragging right
Yeah.
to be able to talk about
Yeah.
winning the Dallas Cup, particularly winning the two super groups. But any Dallas
well,
Cup
Tigers
win,
won the two super groups last year.
Yeah.
And they were very active on social media, letting the world know
world
that they
know.
did. Yeah, which is great for us. I mean, yeah.
haven't they won the most championships?
Over
Monterey's up there too.
Monterey has won the most trophies over all age brackets, but they've never won the super group. 3 finals, not 1 win. So they're kind of like,
yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be an exciting tournament. I'm looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I will be at quite a few of the games, of course.
Yes, you will, and you're helping us as well.
I'm helping you as well.
you're
I'll also be
bringing
writing
your
about it.
expertise.
Yeah.
And you're a great example, and we rely on the expertise of those involved in the soccer community here. People are experts in many different areas of life and of soccer, and this is how Dallas Cup survives, is with the help of these people like you and like everybody we have helping.
Well, thanks for taking 30 minutes
Thank
out
you.
of your
Yeah, you bet.
what's
Yeah.
up, busy?
Good luck editing.
Busy schedule. Oh, no, we'll just put up the whole thing.
Yeah.
We'll go with
Awesome.
no editing.
Awesome. Well, I hope people listen and enjoy, and we'll see you at the fields.
Awesome. Thanks.